Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to this special edition of Anchor Watch. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce a man who usually doesn't need any introduction. He is a veteran. He is a life coach. He is a talk show host. And he's an accomplished author. He's worn so many hats over the course of his life, and he's an advocate to this day. Mr. Montel Williams, United States Naval Academy class of 1980. Welcome aboard, sir. It's an honor to talk to you.
Thanks so much for having me, Bobby. I really appreciate being here, sir.
So I got to tell this personal story as we get into this. I was a high school senior in 1997, and you had just released your first book in 96, and you were doing a book tour, and you came to Atlanta, and my mom pulled me out of school and drove me to your book signing. She didn't tell me who I was going to meet and what it was about. So we wait in line and we get up to you, and the book is at my mom's house to this day. Wow. And you started signing it. My mom said, Montel, my son has an offer of appointment to go to the Naval Academy. He's talking about playing football at North Carolina. Can you talk to him? And you stopped and you looked at me and you said, are you serious? I said, yes, sir. It's not a big deal. You told the publicist, whoever was standing next to you, I'll be back in 5 minutes. You pulled me aside, went around the other side of the bookstore and said, son, that's an opportunity you have to take. You have to take it. And I remember sitting there looking at you like, are you kidding me? Really? And you were like, if it's the best of the best, and if they say they want you, that means you have an opportunity to be amongst the best of the best. You need to really think about this decision. And then you went back to signing books. And I still have the book at my mom's house. And that was the last domino to fall that had me go and pursue becoming a naval officer at the Naval Academy. And I graduated in 2001. And then 109 days later, 9/11 happened, and I served 22 years, recently retired. But I want to thank you personally for that, because
I appreciate that.
I don't know if I would have went that way had we not had that conversation back in January of 97. Along those lines, you have a long career in the military. I think people forget that about you. The core and foundation of you was the United States Marine Corps and the United States Navy. You were in the first class of women to graduate from the Naval Academy. Can you just speak a little bit on how those experiences influenced what you went on to do?
Yeah, it was crazy. I was, a lot of people don't know this, I was enlisted in the Marine Corps first, graduated from Parris Island as a honor man out of my platoon, got meritorious promoted to Lance Corporal, then went on, because of those two meritorious promotions, to get accepted at the Naval Academy Prep School. At the time that happened, I was one of 40 Marines that entered the Naval Academy Prep School. Only 19 of us graduated from the prep school. Only 12 of us got appointments to the academy, and only 4 of us graduated. I'm the only black one.
Wow.
But unbeknownst to me, right before graduation, and unbeknownst to the Navy, I probably had what has turned into my first episode of MS, because I went blind in my left eye before I graduated from the academy. They put me on a medical hold. I literally am one of the only people to walk across the stage at the academy, receive their diploma, and not be commissioned on the same day. My commission didn't come for 6 months, because I was stuck in a medical hold for 6 months because nobody could figure out what was wrong with me.
Wow.
That is why I ended up going into the Navy and not back in the Marine Corps, because my vision wasn't correctable to 2020. So, and the Marine Corps and the Navy only offered me 2 options: Supply Corps or Special Duty Intelligence, and an MPQ status, not physically qualified. But I ended up doing more sea time than most of my peers. I got over 300 days under the water. I got over 600 days on the water on every platform that we have conceivably as a special duty cryptologic officer. Went to the Defense Language Institute, got a degree in Russian, served most of my time at the National Security Agency, though I was, again, deployed, TAD in the Navy all over the place. And that really is where, where the core of me is honed. That's where discipline, that's where leadership, that's where every aspect of my future came from. And I served, and then, I made a decision in '88 to start a program speaking in schools across the country. Spoke about 1,500 high schools across the country to about 1.5 million young people, high schools and colleges and city halls and things like that all over the country, speaking on negative youth trends. That is what was really the genesis of my television show, because everywhere I did it at, media would come out. They local live at 5, 6, whatever. All of the local stations would come out. I had a couple of national stations that were national producers and broadcasters who were very interested in what I was doing. So I had some really big, heavy hitting sponsors nationally that actually helped me tour all over the country. Lots of the shows that I did and lots of the performances that I did ended up winning several local awards. I won the Best of Gannett Award for the year. I won it the second year in a row. And then a year later, I got nominated for a local Emmy in Colorado, and I wasn't even a member of Natus. And that's really what the genesis of the Montel Williams Show is all about.
So no professional background in television. You tried to go back to the core, couldn't do it. So you dealt with a lot of roadblocks to get there. And then when you finally were the trailblazer, I mean, let's be real, I can't think of any other Black men that were hosting their own television show on a national level.
I'm the first.
Right.
I'm the first.
Right. Were you ever intimidated by crossing into that sphere that basically no one had done before?
No, I'm going to tell you something. It was really kind of weird, because as I was speaking around the country, that's where I kind of honed some of my performance skills. And at the same time, it wasn't about performance. It was more about being me. And, that's one thing I think that made our show apart. And the reason why our show stayed on for as long as it is, because, we didn't belabor what happened as much as we talked about why things happened, and we tried to come up with solutions. And that's really, think about it for a second. That's the core of what the military gave to me. You have a mission to accomplish. The mission is important, but why are you doing this mission? And now how are we going to get it done? That's what's more important. And so, that was something that was beaten into me over and over and over again repetitively. And I think that's really what helped, keep the show on. I mean, a lot of people don't know this. My show started in May of 1991, long before the plethora of other television shows, other talk shows began. The year that I started in May, most shows normally start in September. Mine started in May. So I had a full summer ahead of all the new shows that were coming out. But I was immediately thrown into the pool of the Oprah, Donahue, Geraldo, Sally. It was after me that Ronald Reagan Jr. had a show. John Tesh and Lisa Gibbons had a show. Chuck Woolery had a TV show. A lady by the name of Jane Pratt had a show. They all left. It was the next year that Maury Povich started a show, and Ricky Lake started a show. And then all of a sudden, all the J Group came down the road. I'm sorry, no, Ricky didn't start for 2 more years later. So, when my show began, you're correct. I was the first African American male to have a show in his own name on national television. And, I don't think people really quite could get me. I was afraid, and, I shaved my head before I started the show. So, I was the first bald-headed person on TV that we saw on a repetitive basis. So there was Lou Gossett Jr.
Yep. And
there was also Telly Savalas. There was also Yul Brynner. But if you remember, and you're a little young for this, but I mean, back in those days, they used to call people like me cue ball. It wasn't something that was, people thought was a really good look. As a matter of fact, a bald head in the military was considered an eccentric haircut, unless you were on a swim team. And I remember several times while on active duty being stopped by senior officers and saying, trying to dress me down, because they thought that as an officer, I didn't look that professional with a bald head. And I was like, I look even less professional looking like Bozo with hair growing out of the side of my head like you. So I ain't doing it. So I'm sorry, I can't. I'm not going to do it. So I would keep it so short, and, there's nothing they could say about it. And, it was really funny because that first year that the show was on the air, I'll never forget this. If you remember, you go back to 1991, Michael Jordan had hair.
Yes.
Back to 1991, almost all the basketball players had hair. And it was really, really funny. A couple of them called me and said, you know what? My wife told me that Magic called me one night, and we ran into each other at an event. And Magic had just shaved his head the day before. He said, my wife Cookie said, dude, why are you running around with these landing strips over your head? You got to do what that dude on TV is doing. I was like, okay, that's cool. So it's cool. So I'm glad I at least helped to start a trend and solidify it.
I was about to say you inadvertently started a national trend in the 90s and now defined by, especially Black men with bald heads. you have a unique perspective based on your life experience entering the talk show space. Can you talk about, while you had that talk show, what did you learn about America? Because I think a lot of the lessons learned can probably still be applied today.
Oh, I know it sounds a bunch. First off, a lot of people don't know, I did over 3,100, 3,200 shows.
Mhm.
And back then, we averaged 8 guests a show. Sometimes we had as many as 10 to 12. So I literally spoke to close to, 27,000 people seated right beside me.
Mhm.
And these are people from all walks of life. I had senators on my show. I had Congress people on my show. I had mayors on my show. I had, kids on my show. I had adults on my show from every type of walk of life. And the one thing that I remember the most that I think we should pay more attention to today is that, one, the reason why the talk show boom took off is because people finally got a chance and a sense of being heard.
Mm.
You get to participate in this society, but you don't really participate unless you get a chance to actually open your mouth and think that you're being heard. And once you think you're being heard, most of the time, people will follow along with and get involved with decisions that are made if they think that they had a place in making those decisions. Well, we're living in a time right now where sometimes these decisions are being made in spite of what people's views are, and not listening to the people correctly is part of the reason why people don't want to participate in the decisions that have been made. Take a look at what's going on right now. There are people who feel as if this whole idea of let's not play games with what really is happening today. This has
Mhm.
nothing to do with trying to get criminals out of America. This doesn't have anything
Right.
to do with trying to, round up the people who are the criminal element in our society and get them out of here. No, this is a group of people who literally, their intention, whether it be using chains, using whips, using horses, using carriages, their intention is to own other people.
Mm.
And if we don't keep our eye on that prize, there will be another day where, whether it be slavery through chains or slavery through mental
Mm.
pressure, slavery will exist again in America.
Mm. That's a powerful statement, and some people have said, well, a lot of you guys are taking this too far, or you're being extreme with the predictions. But those who have studied history, you're one of them. I've studied it. I mean, based on what you had to do in the military, you had to have a contextual understanding of what's happening around you and compare it.
Look, I mean,
Right.
before me, I was a criminological officer, and you know what that
Right.
is being in the
Yep.
military. I was a 1610 at the time, they still had 1610s. And there were only 3 African American 1610s in the history of the United States Navy before me.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
only three. So
Wow.
so I understand by looking back at the past, because we ain't never gonna figure out where we're going unless we look back at where we've been.
Bingo.
And as we look back at where we've been, we recognize that the signs are on the wall right now,
Yes.
telling us the trajectory we are on, unless we finally get together and do something about it.
So along those lines, let me shift a little bit to your new book, The Sailing of the USS Intrepid. Now, it's interesting. I have three naval heroes, three: John Paul Jones,
Mm-hmm.
Ziggy Sprague,
There you
and
go.
Ernest Evans.
There you
Okay.
go.
Now, interesting enough, I never put two and two together with Sprague being the commanding officer of Intrepid and then him being the commanding officer of Taffy 3. For those who
Yeah.
don't know, Google the Battle of Leyte Gulf. It's the largest naval battle in the history of mankind.
Yep.
And basically,
And he
your
had already
book,
accomplished two others just as big beforehand.
yes,
Battle of Kwajalein, Battle of the Truck.
yes,
Oh, go ahead. Yes, sir.
yes. But and that's what I was going to get to. Your book is like the prequel
Yes.
to the Battle of Leyte Gulf. It's
Yes.
very well written. It's you get involved, well, not just with the commanding officer, but the damage control. I mean, all these different personalities. You specifically highlight the African American gun crew
Yes.
on Intrepid and what they did. Can you expand a little bit about what these personalities, all these different backgrounds mean? Because we're in a situation now where all that's trying to be wiped out. Let's be honest. It's trying to be
Yes.
wiped out.
Yes. What's so crazy is that as we look at, I mean, the story of the Intrepid is a story that America could lean on right now. This was one of the first off, one of the largest ships ever built, most
Mm-hmm.
technically advanced ships ever built. That, and we'll get into the story in a little bit, that had to rely on one of the most ancient forms of nautical technology, the sail, to save it when it got in trouble. However, but between there, this is a ship that pulled together over 3,000 people from all over America, from all different walks of life,
Mm-hmm.
that all had to come together to solve a problem. And the whole crew really helped in solving that problem. Um, so they put their differences aside, they put all their desperate opinions and attitudes aside. And back then, African Americans were on in the Navy were only stewards and cooks.
Yep.
They were allowed to volunteer in a warfighting role if they wanted to. And so all of those African American sailors who passed away and died on the Intrepid, and I'll tell a story when you want to go a little bit through what the book is
Mm-hmm.
kind of about.
Mm-hmm.
They had volunteered to be where they are, and they literally helped protect this ship from being. They was one of the first ships in our Navy history to get struck by a kamikaze. But if that kamikaze had hit the sail or the bridge of the Intrepid would not have existed.
Right.
Instead, they
Right.
stayed in their gun turret. I think it was gun turret 10. They stayed there to the last second, firing on this incoming kamikaze, changing its trajectory, and made it head directly to them. And
Yes.
they literally gave their lives to save all the rest of the people in that ship, which is a story that when we think about contribution of African Americans in war, we never really tell those stories the
No.
way they should be told. But these were African Americans who knew that they had a different place in our society, but they didn't care. They still put their lives on the line to protect what that little piece of democracy meant to them.
I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it to the day I die. The most ultimate patriot in American history has been the African American soldier, sailor, airman, marine,
No
because
question.
it's one thing to fight for your rights when you fully experience them as a citizen. It is another thing to fight for those rights and you're not. You're a second class citizen. Those,
and and
my
be fighting for that little crumb of citizenship while you're
yes,
fighting for the right for this country to exist. Let's
yes,
put that out. Yes,
the double V campaign of World War II. I have a shirt that I wear that has the logo of victory at home, victory abroad. And I had some high schoolers ask me what did that shirt mean, and I had to explain it to them, and they never knew. So I'm
right.
trying to bring that back. But I come from a long line of people who served in the military. My grandfather, Korea. My wife's grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman. So we have bought into this. I have a brother that's an Air Force Academy graduate. He's a pilot. So we understand the long lineage of African Americans, but not just African Americans, other groups other than just white men who have
Correct.
contributed to the tapestry of this. One of the reasons Ernest Evans is one of my personal naval heroes, he was a Native American warrior, a Native
Correct.
American. They called him Big Chief when he was at Annapolis. And this man was like, I'm going to go full flank speed at the largest warship ever built.
Yep.
The balls that this man had, and it
Yep.
cost him his life. And the fact that you're talking about these people, I want to focus real quickly on Admiral Sprague,
Yes.
because of all these guys that are legends, he, in my opinion, gets the least amount of shine that he deserves. I
I
mean, what
agree.
he did, you know, Intrepid, Tappy 3, the whole kit and caboodle. Can you talk a little bit about him?
Yeah, I'm hoping that people walk away from this book and recognize he was cut from a different cloth. This is a young man
Yes.
who grew up about less than a half a mile from where the Wright brothers took off and flew their
Mm-hmm.
plane. And so he was inspired by that his whole life and always wanted to be an aviator at the same time that he knew that he wanted to be a sailor. And back then, militaries didn't actually believe in aircraft carriers. They didn't think,
Right.
and the naval forces didn't believe in aircraft carriers. And Sprague made it his point in life not only to prove their efficacy and efficiency as and projecting war power. He improved everything from our radars to our communication. The communication
Yep.
not only worked between ship to plane, but ship to ship, over the horizon detection. He practiced and literally is the person who helped to define what damage control is by putting into place systems that had not been actually rehearsed and practiced for before this.
Mm-hmm.
But for those who are tuning in, part of the story is an incredible story because I think, you know, the Intrepid, the ship itself, is a character all to itself because
Itself.
she's like
Yes.
the unsinkable Molly Brown. You know,
Yes.
literally got hit by this torpedo by a lone Japanese bomber when it was exiting truck that they think now probably followed the wake of the battle group. And this was one of the largest armadas ever formed in naval history.
Yep.
So this plane was able to sneak through the outer guards of the armada, the destroyers and the cruisers, made its way to where the Intrepid was, literally dropped that torpedo, and then it flew right across the deck of the Intrepid. It's
Mm-hmm.
close enough down that some of the sailors on the Intrepid said they saw the pilot's face. Okay,
Yep.
so that guy was like 30 feet off the deck. And we didn't get him. We didn't sink him. However, right after he flew across the deck, that torpedo hit the rudder. And not only the rudder, but the fantail. It
Yep.
caused the breach in the fantail that went from the waterline all the way up to the flight deck. Pinned the rudder 45 degrees to port, forcing the ship to careen out of control. And Captain Sprague, and like all other captains of that time, knew the fate of the Bismarck, which was the biggest German
Yep.
destroyer ever built. And they also knew the fate of his sister ship, the Yorktown, because the Yorktown got hit in the rudder. And also,
Yep.
these two ships were hitting rudder and literally were careening out of control, could not be steered, and that made them sitting ducks to allow, in the Bismarck's case, the British, you know, Navy and Air
Yep.
Corps to come in and just sink them. And also, the Yorktown was sunk this way. And so Sprague knew in his heart of hearts that, you know, unless I can get some sort of control over this to get this to a place that we can have this repaired, we're sitting ducks, and we're going to give Tojo and the Japanese what they want. And that is something
Exactly.
to hang, you know, to say, we suck the biggest ship that America has. And he didn't want to do that. And so he called upon, and this is a true sign of leadership, he called upon that damage control officer. He called upon
Mm-hmm.
his executive officer. His damage control officer was Lieutenant Reynolds.
Yep.
Called upon the chief bosun, called upon, you know, anybody he could call upon, brought them together on a bridge and said, guys, we got to figure out how we can keep this bow pointed straight.
Right.
And most people don't know, at the time, aircraft carriers like that of the Essex class, the hangar deck was open.
Yep.
Right below the flight deck. Now we closed that in because we finally figured out how to do ventilation, but it was
Mm-hmm.
open so that they could start the engines on the hangar deck, put them up the hangars, bring up the elevators and take them off. And they also could even launch planes on the Intrepid from the hangar deck. And but because that wind was blowing through, it made the bow almost uncontrollable. So
Right.
he's got a rudder that's trying to drive him port, and he's got a bow that's swinging out of the way any way it wants to swing. So they decided, let's hang a sail off the front of this, not for propulsion, but so that we could block the effects of the
Stability.
wind and the current. And it worked. And they sailed that ship back over 3,300 miles back to Hawaii, got, you know, temporarily retrofit with a new kind of a rudder. They sent it up to San Francisco to be put in the dry dock. It lost steerage way again, almost hit the Golden Gate Bridge. Captain Sprague stopped it from doing that,
Mm-hmm.
got it in the dry dock, was repaired, got it back in the battle 3 months later, and is one of the first ships to be hit by a kamikaze. Got hit by two of them.
Yep.
Went back into dry dock, got fixed again, went back into battle, got hit by three kamikazes.
Yep.
Went back into dry dock, went back into battle. Helped finish out World War II, as you've already noted, and then
Yep. The
went
cool
on to
part.
serve off the coast of Korea, went on to serve off the coast of
Yep.
Vietnam, went on to serve as a capsule recovery ship for NASA.
Yes.
Before it was to be scrapped and turned into scrap metal. And then, blessedly, Zachary Fisher, one of the Fisher
Yep.
brothers in New York City, who now that Fisher family is a family that actually runs the Fisher House, which
Mm-hmm.
is a charity that's very near and dear to my heart. And they also run the Intrepid. I reached out to Ken Fisher himself and said, Ken, you know, look, I want to try to do this book, man. I could use your help. You open up the archives? He opened up the archive, everything. We had unfettered access to the ship.
Wow.
And that's how we got the book done. And that's how we literally were able to reach out to some of the family members of some of the crew that
Right.
were on there, getting diaries and other things and information from them and firsthand accounts from them. And all of that went in this book. So this book is really, you know, I like to say it's a book about history, but it's also, it reads as if you're looking at a cinematic novel, you know what I mean? And it takes you
Right.
back in the history of the name of the word Intrepid that was used for several other ships. And its first ship, the Intrepid, has its own stoic history that
Stephen
is,
the
and
Jada.
we open the book with that because I think it's something that
Yes.
people need to understand.
Yes. The story of ships crews, especially, you know, in the World War II era, like I've mentioned before, it's a tapestry. We're living in an environment right now in 2025 where we have leadership that is literally trying to rip that unity apart. I'm just gonna be blunt. When I saw the speeches I've seen recently at West Point, at Fort Bragg, and I'm seeing how this is happening, the parade that's coming, uh, it sickens me to my stomach. I've been very vocal about it as president of Veterans for Responsible Leadership because, in my mind, that ain't us. Never has been.
Never
It's
has
not.
been and should never be. However, unfortunately, we have, and I, not as an aspersion against our fellow uniform wearers in ranks, but we're living in a time where we now have a different generation of people putting on those uniforms. And they
Yes.
don't understand and haven't done the hardcore research that they need to do to understand their lineage, to understand that they have no right to any kind of a political stance whatsoever. They only have a right to support and defend this Constitution of the United States.
Mm.
So there are some military members who unfortunately are misled and are going down the wrong path, I think, and understanding what their responsibility is to the American citizenry.
Yeah.
That being said, we can clearly see that there is a separate agenda. An agenda has been reported, talked about in the 2025 project, talked about by some of these people who are in these positions of authority who are clearly trying to let us all know they want a different kind of America than the America that has existed for this length of time. But what they're going to truly, sorely find out is that what they think will be the America that's going to be what they want is just going to revert back to the same America that we had in the early 1800s, where, you know, you can kick all the brown and black people out of this country you want. Who's going to become the new N word?
Underclass. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I'd be remiss if I did not address this before letting you go. And first of all, just thank you. This has just been fascinating. You battled with MS
Yes,
for
sir.
years. You also have advocated for PTSD advocacy, TBI. Can you tell me, where do you think we stand as a society when dealing with these type of issues, these medical issues, especially those that afflict veterans? What is your read on that?
Let me tell you something, my friend. I am so sad to say I have been in the depths of this battle for 12, 13 years,
Mhm.
working on traumatic brain injury, working on concussive brain injury, working on its effects on our soldiers, working on protocols that we know work. Unfortunately, we're also living at a time where there are those who don't mind preying on the suffering of others.
Mm.
Unfortunately, there's people out there talking a very mean game. They're claiming that they want to cure PTSD and they're lying through their teeth because all they want to do is continue to perpetuate the bullshit sale of drugs and some of the other things that are out there. Do you know right now, Bobby, this is something that, I'd love to come back at some point in time if you want to have me.
Absolutely.
I'll, I'll,
Absolutely.
I'll come back because I'm going to tell you something. I've been working with a team of doctors and people on a protocol right now that is considered the number one treatment for PTSD in the world. This
Wow.
PTSD program, it's called RTM, Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories. Have your producers write it down, look it up, and then I'll come back and tell you about it. RTM, Reconsolidation
Mm.
of Traumatic Memories. This protocol has been proven now in multiple double blind studies. King's College, Walter Reed, been studied by the state of New York, by the state of New Mexico. It's the only protocol out there that treats PTSD right now where 9 out of every 10 people who go through the protocol remit all symptoms of PTSD in 5 to 10 hours, no medication. I'll say it again,
Wow.
5 to 10 hours, no medication. This
Mm.
thing has been fraught with the most vehement and adamant resistance by the VA and by other institutions across this country because, our VA is getting anywhere from 25 to $150,000 a head for this. There are
Wow.
universities around this country who are getting hundreds of millions of dollars to research protocols that are considered the standard of care that have never proven to be greater than 37% efficacious. But they continue to get money to study these things every single year, rolling them around, and they fight against having something like RTM integrated as a cure. I've got another protocol I'm working on that literally has shown 85% efficaciousness in solving back problems and neck problems for our warfighters. And that's one of the biggest problems that veterans end up having, carrying all that stupid ass weight on your back and your shoulders, running around in fields like idiots. Okay. Well, after that, 20 years later, that causes so much damage and compression to your spine that people go through 5, 6, 7 surgeries and they don't get any relief. There's a new relief that's out there right now that's called disc seal. That, so the procedure, it is expensive. It is slightly expensive. However, it's less expensive than 4 or 5 surgeries. Okay.
Right.
So you do it once. It is proven that 85% of the people respond saying and claiming that they feel anywhere from 20 to 75% better after they had this procedure than any other thing they've done. Yet again, the medical community fights it because they ain't getting that 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th surgery. They're not getting all the hardware sales. They're not getting all that crap that they put in people's bodies to sell. So I am not jaded anymore. But I am angry because I'm telling you, I've taken this to the level. Before Secretary Del Toro stepped down, he was a vehement supporter of the RTM protocol. As a matter of fact, allowed me to come and present that in front of the quarterly mental health summit that the Pentagon holds annually. And we presented it last year, and they actually did a press release about it, talking about its efficaciousness. And here we are a year later, and it's still not been employed. Wow. So, I think as far as a nation goes, we just talk a lot of shit about how much we want to support our veterans, and then we turn around and look at these clowns right now. We're trying to say they want to get rid of the VA hospital and turn it all over to civilians who have no idea what the hell we've been through, what the hell we go through, and don't understand. They can't have a communication with a warfighter. They can't. They may think they are empathetic. They may think they are sympathetic. They may think, "Oh, I'll try to understand." You can't understand unless you put that uniform on your back. Shut you know what up? Excuse my mouth.
Yep. No. And the final, I'll give you the final word on this. Sure. So if you could tell America anything right now, let's say you had your talk show and this is your final segment, what warning, what would you tell us right now? We got all these rallies about to happen tomorrow. You have the military parade that's going to be happening, the Army's celebration or Trump's birthday celebration happening tomorrow. What would you say? This is your final, the final 3 minutes you had on your show. What would you tell America right now?
Isn't it funny how, with all the things that are going on in this world, we just had an invasion of one country and another country last night, that could set off a nuclear confrontation worldwide. And with all these things going on, we literally have our cameras focused on rallies taking place in Los Angeles that if you were to look at the 60 miles, 70 miles, I don't know how big Los Angeles is, 70 square miles of Los Angeles, these things are happening in 2 blocks.
Yep.
It's called bait and switch. Because while we look over to the right, we don't look to the left and recognize that none of the promises that were claimed to have happened or could happen in the first day ever happened. Number 2, there are so many egregious offenses going on against the American public. When an elected official steals as much as this one is stealing, that's taking money out of the pockets and hands of fellow American citizens. So if these are the last 3 minutes that I had to be able to say to America, look, we have already hit a place where I believe we've seen our best days. How much longer do we want it to last before we have no days at all left as the United States of America? There may be some say, oh, you're just talking. No, I'm not, because let me tell you something. Let's keep throwing out everybody who does the jobs that no one in America wants to do.
Right.
Our hospital workers, our people who are cleaning the floors in hospitals, our nurses, our caregivers to the elderly, the people who are cleaning out hotels, people who are cleaning out, stacking the shelves at grocery stores, the people who are making the business of America move smoothly, get rid of all of them and show me one. Excuse me, I'm going to be honest with you. Show me one, new middle class black kid or middle class white kid who's going to go pick a field tomorrow. It ain't happening. It ain't happening for less than $50 an hour. So therefore, let's watch the prices of all your food go up. Let's watch the prices of all your hotel fares go up. Let's watch the prices of all your transportation go up. Let's watch, inflation go completely out of control, and then let's watch a government who's going to say, "I'm not going to give you any assistance unless you put your ass back in that field." So, do I need change to slave you, or can I just enslave you because I ain't going to give you anything unless you do what I tell you to do? And if you think the only slaves are going to be brown and black, you best wake your ass up tomorrow, because there was a time in America that, remember, we had no respect for Poles, we had no respect for Italians, we had no respect for Spanish people, we had no respect for anybody other than white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Coming again.
Wow. Well, Montel, I can't tell you how much of an honor this has been, a full circle moment for me. And I just want to thank you, not only just for your service and your advocacy, but always giving people a platform to be heard. You've always done that, no matter if you had a show or not. It's always been, you try to amplify other people's voices, and I appreciate that. And I'm sure everyone in the chat and everyone watching live would echo those sentiments. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and we definitely will have you back on. Because there's so many things I want to dive into with you. So thank you again, and thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you so much for having me, sir. Take care of yourself. Be well.